Welcome to the Libris channel. In this video, we'll dive into the 20th century and introduce you to some of the most amazing and mysterious experiments conducted in the United States. Let's start with the Philadelphia experiment, a mysterious event that has stirred the world for more than 75 years. It is a story of science fiction, government conspiracy, and unexplained phenomena. But what really happened on that fateful October day in 1943? And was it true or fiction? The story is this. During World War II, the U.S. Navy experimented with cloaking technology that made their ships invisible to enemy radar. The USS Eldridge was chosen as the experiment ship, which on October 28, 1943, supposedly became invisible for a short time. However, the experiment failed, and the ship disappeared completely. When it reappeared, some of the crew reportedly fused with the metal of the ship, while others went insane or disappeared completely. The U.S. Navy has always denied that such an experiment took place. However, some researchers claim that there is evidence to support this story. For example, in 1955, a man named Morris K. Jessup published a book called The Case for UFOs, in which he explored the possibility of alien life and the Philadelphia experiment. Jessup received a letter from a man who claimed to have witnessed the experiment, which he described in detail. The letter was signed Carlos Allende, but the true identity of the author remains a mystery. Despite the lack of official documentation, some people believe that the Philadelphia experiment was a real event that took place during World War II. They argue that the government covered it up to prevent panic among the population and to keep the technology a secret from other countries. Another crazy project was called the Solar Guardian. Project Solar Guardian was a secret program organized by the U.S. government in the 1970s, and it is believed that it still exists today. With ready ufologists hypothesized the existence of spaceships that monitor the movement of aliens and protect our solar system from attack. This sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie or a figment of the fevered imagination. However, some argue that there is evidence that such a project exists. Astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to set foot on the moon, has long been convinced that aliens have visited Earth. He has raised the subject in several interviews, stating that extraterrestrial civilizations certainly exist outside our solar system. They have no doubt visited Earth, and the U.S. government may have had access to alien technology. I believe there have been some attempts in the last 60 years to build equipment using these technologies, but they are still very much inferior to alien equipment, Dr. Mitchell told Kerrang! Radio on July 23, 2008. In 2001, Scottish hacker Gary McKinnon hacked into NASA and U.S. Navy and U.S. government databases to get secret information about the existence of alternative energy or zero-energy technology, he told Wired in 2006. During the hack, he allegedly discovered a table that contained a list of extraterrestrial officers. Another document referred to a fleet, but McKinnon could not find the name of any U.S. warships. He believes it was referring to Space Fleet officers. McKinnon said he was deduced as he looked at a UFO image from a NASA computer at the Johnson Space Center. A few months later, in March 2002, authorities charged him with serious hacking charges. This threatened him with 70 years in prison and a $2 million fine. If the Solar Warden program actually exists, it would require an incredible financial outlay. Last year, the U.S. budget for secret programs was $52.6 billion, according to the Washington Post. In 2011 alone, the U.S. government spent $718 billion on national defense and international security. Of course, some of these funds could have gone to the development of such an extraterrestrial project. Who knows? Another crazy project was called Stargate. This was a secret U.S. government program that began in the 1970s and continued through the 1990s. The main purpose of the project was to study and use psychic abilities, such as remote viewing, for intelligence and military purposes. In other words, to create a doomsday prophet. Remote viewing is the ability to receive information about distant objects, places, or events without the use of the conventional senses. Participants in Project Stargate attempted to use a form of telekinesis to obtain information on classified military installations, troop movements, and other strategically important data. Project Stargate was created in response to reports of Soviet research into psychotronic weapons and paranormal phenomena. U.S. intelligence agencies feared that the Soviets might bypass them in the field of psychotronic research and use such abilities for their military and intelligence purposes. In 1995, the U.S. government terminated the Stargate Project. The official reason for closing the program was that the remote viewing results were not reliable or accurate enough for practical application. I would also like to think of the Manchurian Candidate. The Manchurian Candidate is not really an actual secret project, but rather a term derived from a novel and subsequent movie called The Manchurian Candidate from 2004, highly recommended. The novel, however, was written by Richard Condon in 1959. The Manchurian Candidate epitomizes the idea of creating a soldier or agent who is completely controlled and manipulated through hypnosis or other methods of brain control. Although The Manchurian Candidate is a fictional story, it is based on real concerns and assumptions about the possibility of manipulation of human consciousness and behavior. During the Cold War, the idea of mind manipulation was the subject of serious research and experimentation, both in the United States and in the USSR. One of the actual projects that is somewhat related to the idea of the Manchurian Candidate is the MK-Ultra project. This was a secret CIA program that began in the 1950s to investigate the manipulation of human consciousness and control of behavior. Various methods were used in the experiments, including human experiments with LSD, hypnosis, electric shocks, and other forms of psychological trauma. The victim of such mind experiments was Frank Olson. Frank Olson was a chemical scientist and worked at Army research facilities. In 1953, he was assigned to an LSD project as part of the MK-Ultra experiment. It was without his consent. At that time, no one knew yet about the consequences of using such substances. A few days after the experiment ended, Olson died by falling out the window of his hotel room. The circumstances of his death remain the subject of debate and conspiracy theories to this day. For example, Ken Kesey, the famous writer and author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, also participated in experiments with LSD in the 1960s as a volunteer. His experiences with hallucinogens greatly influenced his writing and became the basis for the 1960s counterculture movement. Even criminals were not spared from secret projects. Whitey Bulger, a notorious criminal and leader of the Boston Mafia, was part of the LSD experiments in Atlanta prison in the 1950s. As part of the experiments, Bulger and other inmates received LSD in varying doses. Scientists monitored their reactions to the substance to determine how LSD affected the human psyche and whether it could be used as a mind manipulation tool. Bulger and the other participants in the experiments were deceived as to the purposes and possible consequences of the research. Bulger claimed that the LSD experiments led to his long-term mental problems, including paranoia, hallucinations, and depression. He described his experience in the experiments as a nightmare that haunted him throughout his life. Friends, this is just a small part of the mayhem of science and research in the past, and still going on in secrecy today, at the expense of honest taxpayers. If you are interested in such topics, let me know in the comments, and we will make a couple more cool videos on this topic.